Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, we have Aron Ra, who's like our annual guest, I guess, or something. It's been, what, about
a year.
Almost exactly a year. He was nice enough to come down. The ACA hosts a monthly lecture series at the Austin History Center and give us a lecture this morning about what we can and cannot say that we know. And so thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you.
And, of course, you know, it was a no-brainer to make sure we got him on the show today to take your calls. This is a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. Today is April 3rd, 2011. The phone lines are open, and they'll get the number up for you shortly. We are actually taking calls today and not spending the entire day talking to one person, as we did last week when Ray Comfort called in. Hopefully you enjoyed that show. I know a lot of people have yet to see it, but it was one of the more popular shows that we did, I think. Lots of feedback, and a lot of emails came in even before the show to say, oh, ask him this, and now it's, are you having him on again? Don't know. If it seems to be the right thing, you know, it's not like he's banned from the show or anything. That would be
we
silly.
noticed the same thing on the Magic Sandwich on my own show. I mean, when you have notable, eminent scientists, for some reason you don't get the ratings that you would expect for people that should be respected. But you get some loony whack job on there and the ratings go straight up.
It's, you know, I don't know whether it's Schadenfreude or what, but
people want to see a train wreck.
We are here live. We had our lecture series this morning as well as a special board meeting. As a reminder, the ACA elections are going to be coming up in a month. There's more about that at the website. If you want any information about the ACA, you can visit www.atheist-community.org. There's a frequently asked questions page there, a calendar of events, and links to information about how to contact us. Anybody who doesn't want to get through on the telephone today or is unable to get through, because I see that all the lines are full now, TV at atheist-community.org goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. Aron's not on that list, so if you have email for him, we will do our best to forward it. We do try to read all of them. We can't respond to all of them. It's just way too much. And we appreciate it, and we're grateful that people enjoy what we're doing here. And we're also grateful for people who are critical of what we're doing here. It's, you know, this show is primarily about promoting conversation, and, you know, while certainly some conversations more welcome than others, I do enjoy the feedback from that. A couple quick notes. I'm not going to do all the announcements, but after the show's over today, like normal, we'll be going for dinner at El Arroyo. They'll put the address up on the screen shortly. Any of our events are open to the public. You don't have to be an atheist to attend, as long as you're atheist-friendly and not coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke. Also, a few bigger events coming up that I'm going to mention in part because I'm going to be at them. The American Atheist National Convention is April 21st through 24th in Des Moines, Iowa. You can go to atheists.org for more information about that event. Also, in Oakland, California, May 21st and 22nd is the Regional Atheist Meetup down there, sponsored by the American Atheists. This one's being called the Rapture Ram because, of course, we're going to be there as the world's ending. So the plan is for us to get together on May 21st and talk about things and enjoy ourselves just in case the world ends. And then on May 22nd, we'll laugh about how it didn't. In July, I'm in Tulsa, and I'll have more information about that as we get closer. But while they're queuing up the phones, I wanted to not only thank you again for coming down to the lecture and agreeing to do the show as well, but talk a little bit about what's going on with the Magic Sandwich and other endeavors that you're involved with.
Oh, well, thank you very much. The Magic Sandwich is a blog TV show, runs bi-weekly. It's ran just an hour or so ago, and we had Venom Fang X, YouTube fame, calling in to have a live one-on-one argument with Thunderfoot, also notable on YouTube.
So he's no longer grounded.
So he's no longer grounded. He's come out from hiding. And he's now saying that he wants to change his degree plan so that he can go out into science, to learn what science is, and then disprove evolution, which reminds me of somebody on the Discovery Institute that did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question about when you do this, these drinks on the night that the world is going to end. Mm-hmm. How does your credit work on the night before the end
I'm
of the
charging
world?
everything just in case. I mean, it's not gonna, you don't want to hit an ATM before that one. If you're wrong, you just saved yourself. Of course, I got no use for the money if it ends anyway.
Yeah, as I said on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you've got about 10 minutes to spend it. All right, let's bring in a caller. Let's get something lit up.
You bet. We've got Gonzalo in Rockville, Maryland.
Hello there. How are you guys?
Fine. How are you?
All right.
Oh, just fine. I decided to call in today, and I don't know, I was hoping to discuss a certain man known as Bill Donahue of the Catholic League.
Sure.
Okay. So sometime about a week ago, I was watching a few videos on YouTube, and I came across Bill Donahue discussing alleged bigotry against Catholics. There were two videos that I watched, and one of them was regarding a sculpture of Jesus made out of chocolate in celebration of the Eucharist, you know, the body and blood of the Christ. Now, he came to argue that such a thing was not acceptable from his point of view. Mm-hmm. In the idea that it should be, you know, for lack of a better term, censored. Now, when you hear people behaving like this, you come to the conclusion, what is this guy saying? I mean, the sculptor himself, I don't remember his name, is a Catholic, and he believed that such a sculpture represented his view of Jesus. Now, I like to mention this because I'm sometimes annoyed by how sometimes people will use words, you know, just throw them around in hopes that people will just listen and say, yeah, that's that bad. For example, the word bigotry.
Right.
I mean, if you make a sculpture out of Jesus, I don't see a parallel between that and, you know, the Westboro Baptist Church saying all gays are going to hell.
Now,
I'd like to hear your take on this because...
Sure. This particular issue is at least a year or two old. And if I'm remembering correctly, one of the big objections was that this was a naked, supposedly anatomically correct chocolate Jesus that Bill Donahue found offensive. And my response to it then and now is too bad.
You know what? You just, that was just a simple answer. That was, you see,
it's free speech, and I don't care if the guy who made it is Catholic or the Antichrist. It's still free speech. It's still free expression. And quite frankly, if I'm going to be stuck eating something that is supposedly the body of Jesus, I'd rather have chocolate than a tasteless little wafer any day of the week.
Well, maybe dairy products don't transubstantiate at appropriate.
That may be.
I'm sorry. That was
the thing you want to do is, if you ever get a chance to talk to Bill Donahue about this and his views on transubstantiation, is if he actually believes that the communion wafer really, physically, in reality, turns into the body of Christ, ask him which part of the body.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
and when that happens, can we get a genetic sample?
Yes. I mean, we'd like to test it, but I mean, I wonder if he's thought about whether, you know, like he's eating an earlobe or, you know, something perhaps that he might find just as offensive as the chocolate Jesus.
If you eat Jesus, then doesn't that mean he becomes a part of your body too? I mean, does that mean I get superpowers or something? Just, my God. See,
it may be the case.
In this case, would it be an anatomical correction?
Oh, okay. See, but that's the thing. When I started watching your show, I came to realize that maybe it's good to question everything. And by everything, I mean from Santa Claus to religion. So why is it that we laugh at the story of Santa Claus, but we can't laugh at eating somebody's body? I mean, you know, I have a big appetite, but I don't eat people, okay?
Yeah, and by the way, you know, we can poke a little fun at this, and I have before. I've sat here and ate communion wafers with queso on the show. But to be fair, you know, Catholics by and large don't look, not all of them, by the way, are in agreement on the issue of transubstantiation, but they don't view it that way. We're kind of laughing at this from an external point of view. Because it's something that seems silly when you're outside of it. I can tell you that in much the same way that, for example, the conversation with Ray last week was difficult, and I've had conversations with a number of people where you just can't seem to connect, there is a different mindset for people within the religion that includes protective mechanisms such that their beliefs, no matter how absurd they may seem to somebody else, seem perfectly reasonable to them at the time.
Yeah.
If I knew exactly how this worked and what all the mechanisms were, we could demolish these absurd notions and allow everybody to address reality on reality's terms. But I don't know what they are. And it's, I want to make sure people are clear that when we're laughing about something like this, we're laughing about the belief and not necessarily the individual. Because I was a fundamentalist Christian for 20 some odd years. Lots of my family and friends were. I still love them. They're not all stupid. Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, isn't stupid. He's just wrong. And I was wrong, and I didn't get smarter. I got, better educated and kind of had a change in the methodology by which I would go about to determining whether something was true or not.
Now, you're talking about the way these people rationalize these beliefs, and I've heard the comparisons made of the God virus. I don't know if I want to go that far, but it does seem that religious beliefs have their own sort of built-in, pre-programmed defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. Something is definitely going on that protects that belief. We were talking about somebody that we have experienced in real life, put the fingers in the ears, shaking the head, and when you're doing that, how do you not know that that's exactly what you're doing? When you argue that your church has provided documentation, and I argue the reason I have a problem with this is because your church says this. My church doesn't say that. Yes, it does. Here's the documentation that they gave us. It says it right here. Yank it out of my hand, throw it in the trash. No, it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Okay, don't read it to see that it says that. Instead, yank it away and wish it away, and then don't let me show it to you, and then imagine that it doesn't say that. There has to be some kind of actual defense mechanism where the belief, like an entity, is defending itself. And you're enabling this. So it is, in that sense, very much like an infection, at least from my perspective.
Well, I would also assume that the concept of hell, which we all moral people would reject, could also be seen as a defense or intimidation to some extent, would you say?
I can't see hell as an intimidation, because when I still believed that there was a God, the first thing I lost was the concept of hell, because it makes no sense. Satan makes no sense. There is no reason why a God worth worshiping, worth believing in, would have ever constructed such a thing as hell. And I simply couldn't include it in my belief system at any age, at any time in my life. Now, I was never fundamentalist. I was never taught to believe the way Matt was. But in the religious environment that I came up with, or that I came up in, they had a different set of beliefs. Hell was included, but it wasn't the primary criteria. It wasn't, damnation wasn't the only thing you were fighting.
But were you taught that non-believers would also face damnation?
Damnation was not a focal point of the religion that I was brought up in. Damnation wasn't the center key. It was community that was the focal point there. So they did very little discussion on that. And what the Bible was given to me as the Word of God, it was the ultimate wisdom. God is love. God is the ultimate wisdom. He gave us His Word to explain reality. So, when I open the Bible, I am expecting that I am going to find divine wisdom. Mm-hmm. Guess how few pages I was into that book before I hurled it across the room in disgust and deep disappointment that what I had found was anything but.
I've been reading Genesis for the sake of it, and just a few pages, I just wanted to... My God, I just wanted to throw this over. If God did exist, I would expect him to be a better writer or better, consultant, I guess, because 1,200 pages worth of religious scripture. Yeah, I have college work to do instead. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I think I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Means I'm sorry, what?
I was just saying that, there's a couple of points that it's going to hit, but I want to make sure that, we're going to clear the line and move on to other callers. But not every Christian believes in hell, and they don't all believe it in the same way. But I think that for those who do, it certainly is a way of instilling fear and encouraging people not to question. When you're taught that the very act of questioning puts you in danger, then you have a good motivation to not question and not investigate what you believe. On the subject of Bill Donahue, he's a crybaby, cry wolf. Oh, look at us! We're constantly being oppressed, and his idea of oppression is when he's not allowed to use his views to oppress others.
Yes.
And he's one of the prime reasons that I've used the example of, if you're beating somebody over the head with a stick and I take the stick away, I'm not, oppressing you. And that's what Bill wants to do. He wants to say, no, you don't get to take my stick away. Sorry, in civilized society, actually we do. But
you know what? That's deep, and I think that you have put it in a great, form, because, if somebody insults me, I'm an atheist, so if somebody tells me I'm going to hell, or I'm a dirty communist or whatever, I have to understand that as many tears as it can shed, this country is built upon the F word, aka freedom.
Yep.
And I appreciate how, how Bill Donahue does not go beyond questioning. And I'm sure that I have plenty of Catholics who are pretty much beating themselves over their head thinking, why us?
Yeah.
I think that if you're going to battle bigotry, at least understand what it is, okay? Because bigotry is not just every word that comes out of somebody's mouth.
Yeah, there's a serious disconnect on a number of concepts between someone of one worldview and someone of another. And this is an area where it shows up a lot. But thanks a lot for the call, Gonzalo. I appreciate it.
By the way, one last thing.
Sure.
Matt, I have a friend who went to UMBC when you went, and I saw the video. As usual, you did a great job, and I appreciate you guys letting me call in.
Sure, thanks a lot.
Go ahead and spread the godless gospel, guys. See ya.
I will do. Thanks a lot. We've got Chris in Grand Rapids.
Hi, guys.
Hey, thanks for holding.
Hey, thanks. My wife and I are both non-believers, and recently we had a discussion. And she had posed an argument to me which I really didn't have a good answer. So I would like to simply pose that argument to you guys and then hear your comments. It basically goes like this. You guys have a science-based world. You use science to determine what is right, what is wrong, what is truth, and what is non-truth. And when you apply that science to the Bible doesn't hold up because man can't walk on water. He has more mass than man. But the question to you is this. What if you turn that around? Can you guys use simply what the Bible says and simply what the Bible teaches to prove that science is the correct way to answer questions and is the absolute truth? And if you can't, then when you have these debates with religious people, aren't you simply having a difference of opinion between a person who believes in a science-based world and a person who believes in a Bible-based world?
I don't have a science-based worldview. I have a reality-based worldview, and science has continually demonstrated that it is the single best tool for determining and building an understanding of reality. So, yeah, it is a difference of opinion, and it is a bias. I have a bias towards that which is demonstrably true, and my opinion is that reality is best attested to by science. And if they have some other method that they think gives a better understanding of reality, then they need to demonstrate it. And I'd also ask, how are they going to do that without using science?
Yeah, and as I was saying today to the ACA, science is the tool that works in any reality, regardless what you're in. When you ask your series of 20 questions, for example, you are ascertaining certain facts. Based on those, you improve your understanding. Based on the next bit of acquired information, you then improve your understanding again. You can use that to evaluate any of the reality that you're on. What you have with the Bible is not a Bible-based belief system. It's a belief-based system. You just promote whatever you want. I'm sure you've noticed when you argue with people on matters of the Bible, when you bring up something that is in the Bible that is objectionable, they deny its existence or they deny its interpretation, or you just don't understand it because you're not reading it through their lens so that they interpret it differently, and so they are able to assume that the Bible says things it doesn't really say, and they're able to excuse what the Bible does say. So I don't see it as being Bible-based versus science-based. I say one is reality and one is fantasy. That's the only way that I would be able to view that?
Well, I'm in agreement with you guys, but like I said, the basic premise was that they'll say, and although I don't agree with it, and I don't think it's a good answer,
Sure.
anything you say is demonstrable by science, they'll say, well, this is demonstrable by God, and the person has to show it to be like God chose not to show it today. You don't show it next week or whatever. And so I like I said, I'm in agreement with you guys, but I just want to know what your take was on that.
Sure. If God just chooses, not to demonstrate it, then their claim is indistinguishable from the truth of their claim is indistinguishable from it being false.
Indistinguishable from the illusions of delusion.
If there's a God out there who's going to, like for example, he's going to reveal himself to those two people and not these two people, then to everybody other than those two people, the claim that they've had a revelation is indistinguishable from the fact that they didn't.
Yeah, and my opinion has been wrong. And I've had to come to terms with the fact that my opinion is wrong. They say your opinion can't be wrong. Yes, it can, and I know a few times when it is. So I don't base anything on opinion. When I argue, I'm going to argue on fact. And it's going to be something where we can set a point that you can't push back on. It's not opinion-based. It's not flexible. We establish facts. We work from there. And when I say, for example, that they want to prove the existence of God through some interpretation of prophecies or whatever that don't make sense when viewed from an outside perspective. Okay, I'm going to prove that you're an ape, and I'm going to be able to lay out the facts that do demonstrate that to such a degree that you can't argue against it. And I know that you're not arguing in this. I'm just using you as a hypothetical person. And
no problem at all. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I'm going to lay out some facts you can't argue against, and that you will have to concede. What can you do in the same degree to me, in terms of your religious perspective? What can you factually show me is actually correct? Anything. Again, using you as a hypothetical person that I might have this discussion with.
Yeah, and what we find is that when pressed to do that, the examples that they offer, the things that they want to count as evidence in favor of their worldview are assertions that are unsupported by anything beyond that, or appeals to direct experience, which is unverifiable,
and anecdotal.
Appeals to miracles, which should, by the way, be testable, and in the occasions where we've tested them, for things like the efficacy of prayer, etc., they fail miserably. They perform no better than chance. Or claims of broad faith-based claims of, well, this is something that you simply can't comprehend. Then how on earth can you possibly claim to believe it? I mean, if I don't comprehend something, I'm certainly not going to say that I believe it. If I can't comprehend it, what is it that I believe? And so, with those being the kind of foundational claims that people make in support of this worldview, I think if you can't come to agreement, as Aron was pointing out, on how you go about discerning truth, then your conversation is about gods or beliefs or anything else is irrelevant and useless. And instead, you need to have a conversation about how you go about agreeing on discerning truth. And if you can't ever resolve that, then, you've got nowhere else to go.
The ironic thing is that the whole time I was growing up, I was always told, when people realized that I accepted evolution, people would say, well, why would you build your house on shifting sand? Mm-hmm. What is the shifting sand? Hard facts is what I've got. Okay, and opinion versus opinion, and then we're going to change our opinion about whether there is a purgatory or how many original sins there are. We're going to change our opinions and our interpretations with every new denomination. That's shifting sand. That's not what I've got.
Okay. I also had a quick comment, and then I'll let you guys get to the callers. I noticed you guys having a debate a lot with believers and stuff like that. And you seem to go, and I know this isn't 100% every case, but just my general impression is you seem to try to convince a believer that there is a not God. You try to get them to go from belief in God to belief in not God. And I don't know about your experience in religion, but my experience was I believed in Christian God, and then I realized that, well, some things don't here make sense. What if there's another God? What if Islam's correct? What if this is correct? And just a suggestion that when you have these debates with people trying to get them to go to non-God, proving a negative, simply say, okay, for argument's sake, let's say that there is a God. Why is he a Christian God instead of a Muslim God or a Greek God or stuff like that? Because that's what basically converted me over, was not going from God to not God, but going from, well, how do I know this is the right God? And that was just my comment.
Yeah, if I can, I mean, I often make just for the sake of argument, let's assume that God is factual, that we don't need to even argue about his existence. What does that show? Okay, we know that God is a fact. We also know that evolution is a fact. So what's that tell you? And these people are very often arguing, against evolution, and they think evolution means non-God. But it doesn't have to. What I want to argue with people is not to get them to not believe in God, because I personally don't care. What I want to stop them from doing is asserting as fact that which is not evidently true. It's fundamentally dishonest. And that's my argument against them.
And in my case, I agree. There's a lot of different of pathways of escape from the shackles of religion, and that's one of many. Usually, though, when I'm having a conversation with somebody on the phone who is a believer, for example, take last week's show with Ray, there was never an attempt or even a slim hope in my mind that I was going to convince Ray that he was wrong. My purpose wasn't to convince Ray. My purpose was to have a conversation so that other people who watched it could assess the merits of the positions and come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, there's an important point of difference with Ray, though. Ray's not typical.
Yeah.
Because what you have with someone like me is if I make a statement and it turns out to be incorrect, there's a degree of shame for me. Okay? I have to owe up that I made a mistake. I have to correct that mistake. Somebody may have been deceived by something I said, and if I said something out on public airwaves like this, and it turned out to be incorrect and there was no other source, I'm going to have to publish something myself to get that corrected, because I don't want people being deceived. As I said, there's shame and there's accountability. Now, when Ray says something incorrect, his publisher takes that, runs with it, and he gets another $1,000 in his bank account. So you're never going to convince Ray of anything. This is his livelihood.
Yeah. So I do take your point, though, that there's a lot of different ways, and we'll try a broad spectrum. I tend to try whatever direction the calls go, and that's how I tend to go. And I've assumed a number of things for the sake of arguments, because while I don't I don't think it's necessary to concede a whole bunch of ground. I'm happy to kind of talk about the subject on almost any terms that the caller wants to, even right down to conceding the Christian God in order to show the absurdity of the various claims in the Bible, etc.
All right. Well, thank you guys for taking the call, and I think you guys do a great job.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. As a reminder, it's almost 5 o'clock. After the show's over, we'll be going to dinner at El Arroyo. I probably didn't announce that enough last week with the distractions, so I want to make sure I got it out today. And they'll get the address up there in a minute. But we've got full phone lines, and we've only get Aron down here like once a year, so I want to get through as many of these as we can. Cameron in Manhattan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Matt?
Great. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, no problem. Aaron, I wanted to talk to you about the textbook in Texas. Last I heard, they were rewriting or omitting history or something crazy like that. What's going on?
Well, what had happened with that was that Texas realized that because they had this system that was set up by a... Wow, okay. Weird background noise. Anyway.
I'm gonna put you on hold just so we don't have that noise, but we'll get back to you.
Okay. All right, so Texas had a lot of buying power, and when they exert their force on the millions of students that we had, it was the case that when they demand that their textbooks read a certain way, that publishers would adhere to that. And since Texas had these demands and so many other people were going to follow suit, then Texas pretty much had the ground. We say what goes into the textbooks, and that's the way everybody else in the country is going to end up following suit. Two things happened to change that. One, the Board of Education became an international embarrassment. Two, Texas lost its buying edge, and it lost its buying edge for two reasons. One, this is the Internet age. They can now change and have multiple copies of the same book. They don't have to run the old-style printing presses. The Internet allows for each state to have their own independent book if they wanted to go that route. But then on top of that, Texas also ran out of money. They can't buy their own textbooks now. So the textbooks we have now are already outdated, and they're going to be for a while. So they tried to overexert their buying power. Now they're broke, and now we're reaping the benefits of it.
You there?
I think
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sounds all right.
And thanks for asking.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.
We've got Daniel in Pittsburgh, Ohio.
Hey, guys.
How you
Hey.
doing?
Good. I just, I was, when I was growing up, I was a Christian, but I was always skeptical, not really hardline,
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really hardline atheist either till about a year ago. And I just got done watching Jesus Camp a couple months ago, and I got to tell you, that was horrific.
Yeah.
It was like the most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Doesn't it alarm you that religious people, certainly not all of them, but there are religious people that can watch that show and not be disgusted, who don't recognize immediately what traumatizing abuse and psychological damage that is? It alarms me that anybody could watch that and think that that was normal or acceptable by anybody's standards.
Yeah, I've talked about that documentary a couple times. The ACA went as a group to go see it in a local theater, and I think I took somewhere between 11 and 13 pages of notes as it was going on, and really didn't need to, because while I had been to camps as a youth that were similar to that, not quite as over the top in some areas. I had a pretty good understanding of it, and I knew this had gone on. So this was not a complete shock to me. What I loved was the fact that this was a documentary that treated this particular camp fairly, and of course pointed out that this isn't necessarily indicative of every Christian belief or Christian camp, where they didn't insert a whole lot of their own judgments on this. But there's a moment that I talk about every time I talk about this, towards the end when she's driving through the car wash, and she's saying something that's kind of crazy, and it's like the culmination of all the crazy that's been in the whole documentary. And the camera focuses in on the flaps that are exiting the car wash, and there's a huge stop sign on there, and the camera just kind of lingers there. And I have to think that that was an intentional inclusion from the people who put the documentary together, and it was just a stroke of brilliance, because it really kind of set the tone. It was exactly what I was thinking. At that point, I'd been watching the whole documentary, and it was at the point where I just wanted to scream stop, and they focus on that stop sign on the exit. And I thought it was awesome. But for people who haven't seen it yet, I know it was available on Netflix. I'm not sure if it still is. It still is?
That's where I watched that, actually.
I've got it on DVD, so I just toss it in whenever I want to get mad. But it's a really, it's a well-done film overall. But as far as the documentary to show what's going on with the indoctrination of kids, and what you may have to deal with in at least some small pockets of America in the next 10 to 15 years, it's an eye-opener.
Yeah, that's what really bothers me about it, too, is that it's like an infection, and it's like, down the line, they're going to keep spreading the same stuff, and it's just ignorance.
Well, it's like, they say that children who were abused tend to be abusers. When you are subjected to this kind of psychological conditioning, how can you possibly recover from that? And it ensures that you are almost certainly going to raise your children to be the same way. And if you ever come out of that environment, you have to go through, psychological treatment to get off of it, much the same way you would with addictive drugs.
I know, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard a recent statistic that only 1 out of 9 children break through from parents' religious beliefs, or something like that.
No.
I don't know. I don't know if that's correct or not. I do know that there's statistics showing that kids who go to college depart from their original religious views at a rate which I think is paltry, but which Christians think is alarming. I'd like to see closer to 100%. But we can't all have what we want. But it's enough to make them panic and concerned. And so there have been some who have come out against when and there's books on the subject. When you're sending your Christian child off to college, here are the things that you want to look out for. Here's the things you look for in a college, and here's the things you want to look out for and prepare them for, because, you know, it's the dirty little secret that they've probably been raised in a fairly sheltered environment, surrounded by people who share the beliefs that they hold, and they're going to an environment that not only encourages questioning, learning, but is a diverse environment where they're going to encounter people of varying beliefs and have to deal with that. It's you know, we talk about how important education is, and one of the aspects of, you know, like public school education, et cetera, is it gets kids in an environment where they have to learn a little bit about dealing with others in reality.
One of the greatest.
It's not nearly as impactful as college as far as the diversity goes.
One of the biggest advantages for college for me was that I found out about prejudices I didn't even know I had.
Yeah.
Things I had been conditioned to believe were completely destroyed once I got into a college environment. The first 3 Muslims that I had ever met in real life fit every stereotype I had been given. But the latter 9 that I met on college campuses had completely overturned everything I thought I knew. And that's just one example. I mean, when you get people of other religions, other cultures, other countries, it expanded me well beyond what my, let's call it a rural upbringing, had led me to believe up to that point.
And that's terrifying for many religious believers, particularly fundamentalist Christians, where one of the protective mechanisms of maintaining belief is this insulation. This constant reaffirmation of your beliefs, being surrounded by people who don't challenge you. I've talked before about how, you know, when I left high school, I went in the Navy for a little over 8 years, and while I was still a believer the entire time, that experience was critical to changing the way I thought about a great many things, right down to, you know, I had to interact with gay people for the first time, and even though I was dealing with under the abominable don't ask, don't tell policy, I actually credit that with being a good thing. Not overall. I mean, it should have never happened, but it was eye-opening, because I was in a position where I had to work and discharge people who were good at their job, decent people, all because somebody else found out they were gay and exposed them.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine how bad that would feel to just, you know, lose your job over loving somebody.
Yeah, it was. There were certain things that were absurd like that, and there was also a lot of interaction with people whose beliefs were different from mine. And, you know, in that kind of environment, for example, during the Gulf War, when you've got 6,000 people on a carrier, there's not, you know, your religious debates and discussions much less heated in that environment, because you're not necessarily sure. You know, it's not like you're going to start talking trash about somebody else's religion, because they're probably a friend of yours, and your life may depend on them at some point. And so the discussions change, and you find yourself in this establishment of kind of brotherhood and camaraderie that happens with service members, in changing your perspective a little bit about other people, and it makes you more open to this, you know, diversity of experience.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for the call.
Yep, no problem. And guys, if I had the money, I would fly out to Texas right now just so I could sit down and eat with you guys.
Cool. Well, you better save up that money and enough to get me some food, because, you know, if you're going to come all this way, you might as well get me a drink or something, right?
Yeah, trust me, if I could, I would.
I tell you what, you get the money saved up, I'll get you a drink.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, Daniel. We've got, is it Ed in Denver?
Hey, guys, how's it going?
Good.
I appreciate both your show and Aron and his YouTube channel. I think it's very, very educational for any layman or any educated person as well. I want to talk to you guys about, kind of following on the previous caller, about children and indoctrination to different churches. A quick story, my girlfriend, she was a Mormon when I met her. A practicing one. So I went, you know, I like learning about different religions, so I went to her church to see what they were all about. It was pretty interesting on their practices. I guess the cool thing that I saw from my old church, they have a preacher per se, but they just have someone who talks, and then it's more or less like testimony meeting. So everybody just talks about, you know, what's happening in their week and stuff. But, you know, I started looking acts, the actual practices of Mormons and what they believe, the story of Joseph Smith and whatnot, I found it very disturbing. So, as I don't like to call myself a rationalist, but just a person who focuses on reality, I say, well, look at the evidence on the actual book that you have, which is, of course, is 3, the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price.
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus on the part of polygamy. Because she kept, because I kept, before we were going to the church, I told her, well, don't you guys believe in polygamy? She said, no, we don't.
Yeah.
Went to the church. Yeah, they didn't speak anything at all about polygamy.
That's because the modern Mormon church isn't in favor of polygamy. That's the FLDS.
Right. But the problem is that the Doctrine and Covenants still state polygamy as an actual practice. So more or less they're dissing what the book says. Yep,
just like the Bible supports slavery, despite what people actually,
That's the problem when your religious texts don't change, but your interpretations of them have to in order to remain politically correct.
Exactly. And once I showed it to her, she actually got it really quickly. She was pretty devastated for about a week. Then she got out of it. Now she's, I guess, a practicing atheist. You want to call it
practicing?
that?
Kirk Cameron used to be a devout atheist. I don't know what devout or practicing means, but I think I'm on board. I hope to get it right someday, so I'm practicing.
How much practice do you need to get devout?
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I've been dating her for 2 years now, so of course I met her family. Mm-hmm. Now, her father is kind of like a third in command in the church that they go to.
Sure.
So he's pretty high up there. So is one of her sisters, and of course her mother. Now, what I was talking to, the guy that answers the calls, mm-hmm. Is how can one discern on the actions, not just of a Mormon, but just of any type of believer? How can you discern if their actions towards you are actually genuine from themselves, or because any type of scripture tells them to?
Sure. So you find yourself suspicious of the motives of believers as to whether or not they're actually being decent people because they understand that being decent is a good thing, or out of fear of punishment, hell, etc.
The only way to really know that is to give them the political advantage. Generally, we see what happens when religion rules over law. It becomes a lot less polite.
Right.
I'd like to think that by and large, most people, despite what many religions tend to claim, most people actually probably are decent, and probably are decent for the right reasons, even if they attribute it to something else. Because I have yet to, I actually became a better person, I'd say, overall, after giving up my religious beliefs. And I think that's the case for many people who were believed as I did. But the thing to remember is that most believers actually probably are sincere, honest people who want good things. What's happened is their desire to live in a good world and to try to be positive has managed to get them conned into believing a particular doctrine that also simultaneously twists their moral compass, such that there are some actions that should be apparently wrong, evil, whatever label you want to put on them, that they think are actually good. That's the real pollution that comes from this. The good that people tend to do, they may take that out of fear of reprisal or trying to get to heaven or avoid hell or whatever, but we see altruism and we see behavior as imposed by cultures and societies, not only within the modern human world, but also in the animal world as well. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'd just kind of smile and be glad they're being nice.
Yeah, I'd also like to throw out that I know people. I know a few people that are genuinely great people, and the reason that they are religious is because they're naturally wonderful, moral human beings, and so they choose something that they recognize because culture has taught them, good Christian values, whatever. So that's what they want. They They have the good values. They think the word Christian has to be attached to that. They don't realize that it doesn't. But because they're good people, they've gone into this system, and this is the way that it's advertised. Now, we look at the content of their scriptures, and we say, this is not good. This is not a value. This certainly isn't a moral standard. Please, no, nowhere. But they're not looking at that, because they're able to blot that out. If there's something that seems objectionable, they must not understand it properly, and so they don't focus on those things. They focus on the things that got them involved in being good people anyway, and that's generally community. And so that's where they focus all their attention, and it's not really in Scripture.
Oh, exactly. I completely agree. Both of my father and mother are actually Mormon missionaries, but I'm sure you guys heard of Salvation Army. I'm sure they're pretty known in Texas.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I asked my dad this a few years ago. He knows I'm an atheist, but we get along. But I asked him, I think he went in when he was about 25, and he's 62 now. And I asked him, well, what was your main reason for going in here? And he said, honestly, I like helping people.
Most of us do.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's kind of the answer you were looking for anyway. I think that's typical. I may be wrong, but I do think that's pretty typical.
Right. I guess my thing was, if are you actually being genuine with me, or are you doing this because God tells you to? Yeah. And if he wasn't telling you to, would you be a jerk?
But that's not limited to religion anyway. I mean, I don't want to give the misperception that this is a limitation of religion. There are atheists. There are atheists who are nice to me. I have no idea what their motivation is behind it. I just generally tend to take it as an assumption that most people I meet who are decent because they have a good understanding of it. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's some advantage I don't see. I'm not overly concerned about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much to both. You guys are doing an awesome thing, and can't wait to hear from more of you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye.
As a reminder, since there's only like 12 or 13 minutes left in the show, there's dinner after the show at El Arroyo, and they'll probably put the address up there as well.
This show's entirely too short.
Well, it used to be 90 minutes. Last time you were here, it was 90 minutes, and now we've been cut down to an hour. It's not our fault. Nothing we can do about it. You were talking about how they
feel drawn to a community environment.
Well, this idea that that God and the motivation, the things that they would normally question, are presented as beyond your understanding. That ties into one of the mechanisms that we talked about before that keeps religion so popular. If you look at it, if you go to Catholic services, and if they're done in English, you'll hear the word mystery probably more than any other, it seemed to me, because I'm sitting there and it's, as they're going through the various rituals, it's mystery this, mystery that, mystery this, mystery that. And when you listen to, I have gone to ministers in the past with questions that I had, and it's, that's just something that's beyond our understanding, and it's all in God's hands. And so instead of actually encouraging somebody to investigate and find truth, instead what they do is they say, yeah, that does seem odd, but you can rest easy knowing that God is much smarter than you. God is good ultimately. God has a plan, and this is all part of his plan. So you don't have to feel discomfort about not knowing. You don't have to feel discomfort about thinking that this may be wrong. And it basically works as just a little wall to prevent any inquiry.
You've heard the song, the country song, Jesus Take the Wheel. I mean, I only think that you had heard this because you host this show. That's the only reason that I know.
I've heard it because they play it all over the place.
Okay, well, the only reason I've heard it is because people send me these links laughingly, expecting that I'm going to laugh at this thing. Okay, if you think, you're in a car wreck, or you're in your imminent wreck, your car is spinning out of control, Jesus take the wheel. Okay, here's an experiment. Try that before the car goes out of control. Let me see how brilliant your God is then.
Yeah. And don't try that. I don't want somebody out there to think that Aron was Well, I hope he wasn't being serious.
No.
Because we'd rather not see you die over something silly. Test it with something smaller.
Yeah.
Finding your keys.
I don't care how you do it, but if we could just let's just highlight that one thought. Test it.
Oh, no. Thou shalt not put the Lord thy God to the test. See?
Oh, gosh, why not?
The defense mechanism in there for that, too. There is in the big book of multiple choice that people call the Bible, there is a defense for almost everything. So we got, is it Atheist at Large? How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking my calls, guys.
Sure, welcome.
I have a possible conjecture on why these Christians and believers in general believe what they believe so fervently. And it's based on information. I've studied Alzheimer's and Parkinson's because I have a lot of it in my family. So I've been kind of hitting the books and looking at V.S. Ramachandran and stuff like that. He talks about empathy neurons. And these empathy or Dalai Lama neurons are something where you see somebody hit their hand with a hammer, you flinch.
Right.
There's no reason for that. There's a separation between you and the person. But these neurons fire as an evolutionary protective mode that suggests to you that, hey, don't do that. So what I see is that they see God as a real person, as somebody part of their lives, just as a family member, a very close family member, someone that they love deeply. This is also something that comes into play with their idea of belief. That's the oxytocin and vasopressin receptors that are going to be displayed with the different characteristics of love. When you've got a deep love for somebody, almost lustful love, oxytocin is going to be expressed in your brain. And if you're talking yourself into, this type of love, you may have an overemphasis or almost an overload or some type of, drugging effect. So what oxytocin does, one of the first things that it does, it removes your judgment. So now, when you take and put in front of these people that God killed off an entire planet except for 8 incestual, homosexual family members in the Genesis story, now we see some kind of a disconnect. You should see something negative, but the logic processes are diminished because of their judgment. You can't tell somebody that's deeply in love with somebody, no, that guy's no good. Here's all the evidence. They won't listen to you until their brain chemistry settles down. So that's kind of my conjecture on this thing. I sure wish somebody would look into it.
And I would think that Ramachandran and others probably are. But, there's a danger. That may very well be a part of it. There may be. I'm not sure where you got that Noah's family was homosexual, but there may be one aspect to it. The thing is that basically everything that we're talking about, both the defense mechanisms that are external and the ones that we build up ourselves, because we already know that once somebody, vocally commits to an idea, that they're much less likely to change their mind. And we've seen kind of the thing that you're talking about with abused spouses who have managed. I'm sorry, your phone's actually breaking up, so I'm only catching like every other word. But we've seen this with like abused spouses who have come to this mindset because of the situation they're in, that this is happening, that they deserve it, that this is an expression of love, etc. This kind of perversion of what would normally be considered
Stockholm syndrome, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
That all goes along with it. And with Ham, with being the homosexual, if you study the Jewish traditions and stuff, when Noah looks down, Noah was naked in the tent, he was laying on the table. Ham came in and came upon his father's nakedness. When you talk to Jews that are studied in this term of nakedness, coming upon his nakedness, is suggesting a genital manipulation. And please, ask a rabbi or some Jews that are studied in this to try and, verify or, debunk me. But Noah says that when he wakes up, he looks down and sees what his son has done. So there is some emphasis there that is pointed to that. And I got this from a debate with a Christian preacher in the chat room once. And I went to some of the Jewish guys at STICM, and they verified that it is possibly some type of a genital manipulation.
Sure, it's possible that you can interpret it that way, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't think
I
wouldn't interpret came upon his nakedness quite that same way.
But you don't want to.
You're not Jewish.
Well, and it's also a bit anachronistic, and saying what the author's original intent is something we can't do. I just don't.
And the man was 600 after all.
I just don't know that it's justified enough to be tossing that in with the rest of it. Isn't it enough to point out the absurdity of supposedly destroying everybody except for one family, where the father was so drunk that he cursed one of his sons to be a slave for perhaps seeing him naked or perhaps manipulating his genitals. Who knows?
Well, now I understand why he had to flood the entire world, because Noah was the best guy there was. And he's a naked old drunk cursing his own children. If he's the best...
Right, exactly.
And I think it's absurd. I think it's absolutely absurd to propose not only that this ever happened, but I think it kind of shows, like I've said before, the Bible's like a chronology, like a timeline of somebody, a God who just keeps failing. I make the whole world, and then I just put two people down there, and that goes wrong. And so I make a little correction, and it goes wrong again. And then I make another correction, and it goes wrong again. And then, okay, it's time to flood the whole world and start over and make this correction. And, right off the bat, Noah's drunk and cursing his sons.
Well, you got the same thing when you get with Sodom and Gomorrah. You got Lot. As soon as his wife is conveniently removed from the picture, then his daughters come on his nakedness.
And in a much more explicit sense.
Yes, exactly. And we are to believe
it's the same.
Well, no, this is the beauty of it.
No, the language is more explicit.
He finds himself in a cave with his own daughters. He's drunk and blames them. And I find it hard to believe that anybody believes that aspect of the story. Let's drop everything else for the moment.
I've been drunk. Lots of liar, but.
Well, the girls did conspire to get him drunk.
In any case, there's only like 30 seconds left, and I got to let you go because there's one call I got to try to get to real quick.
Take care, guys, and thanks for taking my call.
Sure. We've got Sonia in Houston. Hello?
Hello?
I apologize. We have Sonia, can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize. We've completely run out of time. We're actually starting to put up the credits. I wish we'd have got to your call sooner.
That's fine, no problem. I could try next weekend. Thank you so much for your time.
I'd love it, but since they've written down your question, I'm going to try and answer it right before we go off the air, maybe. Who knows? Thanks, Sonia.
Okay, thanks.
In a nutshell, Sonia was asking why you don't think that the Bible is sufficient to prove God's existence, and it's because no textual account, no testimonial account could ever be sufficient justification for miracles. Otherwise, if you accept the Bible as proof of God's existence, then you have to accept the holy books and ancient traditions of every other religion on the planet, which puts you in the position of believing competing things. We are completely out of time. There's the list of the crew. Thanks, Aron, for coming down again. Always a pleasure. We'll have him back anytime. Thanks to the folks who showed up at the studio. We'll be at El Arroyo shortly. Be safe, and Russell will be here next week. I get the week off.
Can we do another show based just on her question?
I hope so.
I'd just like to discuss that for an hour.
You bet. Bye-bye.